Noswaith croeso cynnes I chi gyd, good evening and a warm welcome. It's a great privilege for me this evening to be sitting here because should I ever go to a desert island, and Sue Lawley was asking me what I'd take with me, the music I would take quite seriously would be the Manics Motorcycle Emptiness. It's a song I play when I need invigorating. I have no idea, even now, having heard it hundreds of times, what on earth it means. But the other thing I take with me is I take Patrick Jones, and at the point when I would begin to be scared of the wild animals, I'd get Patrick to recite one of his poems with that staccato passion that he's got, and any wild animals with even a modicum of sense would keep well away. You'll find out as the evening progresses that these chaps have known each other for a long time and have actually managed to spark off creatively against each other. But where I was going to start was with one observation. Patrick has in the past said that his favourite words, one is an expletive, which you use quite a lot in your plays.
As an adjective.
As an adjective, and an adverb and a verb and everything else. And the other is the word beautiful. But if you were to run your plays and your poetry through the sort of computer that finds out that Shakespeare's King Lear isn't about a king and his daughters, but is about eyes, because King Lear is about eyes, one of the words that comes up with your stuff is truth. And similarly with the Manics, this is my truth, tell me yours, referring to Nye Bevan, and you've got songs in which you say, if white Americans sold the truth, and so on. It seems to me that truth is a commodity in pretty short supply at the moment.
Should I start? Yeah. I think as a writer, the writers have inspired me to try to tell a truth. I don't believe in the truth. I just think it's about telling a truth, as Ken Loach was saying earlier, but it's just finding those human stories and just going the limit with it, not compromising with, I suppose, your truth in a way, and going out on a limb, not to please people, but to try and find some truth, And I just feel my writing tries to reflect that in some way. No?
Yeah, I just kind of feel the same. It's just, whether you're a painter or a writer or a lovely musician, it's just best to try and say something which is immediately open to criticism. I think, that kind of like embodies what you might think truth means. As soon as you say something, it should be open to criticism, and you should even be belittled for it. I think it's important.
And when you were growing up in Blackwood, it was, it still was a mining town, and I'm sure that when you grew up, the truths would be ones that came from socialist thinkers. I mean, that was the sort of climate of the times. But things have changed in Blackwood. You've actually seen, if you like, a time of employment turn into unemployment. Youth become disaffected and so on.
Yeah, to a point, although I try not to sort of romanticise that. I think there is employment, but it's I'd like to call it underemployment. I just think we're sort of forced into these terrible sort of service sector jobs and factory estates and all that. That's why I think employment has gone, which I think has led to many other fractures of the community. And interestingly, in Blackburn now, the local council is run by Plaid Cymru, so I think people have got disillusioned with Labour and turned to something else, So, yeah, things have changed.
One thing that connects your early lives is that you have a name that your dad gave you because he liked James Dean, so that was a nod to America. Yeah. And you could have been called Clint Eastwood, couldn't you?
Yeah, I could have been a Clint.
Is that serious?
No, it's just one of those things. My mother kind of threatened to divorce him when she'd just given birth to me about 5 hours ago, and he said it's going to be Clint Eastwood, and she went, I'm divorcing you.
And so James Dean was born. But
yeah.
Because one of the earliest influences I can discern is that you went to America quite early on and brought back your tales and understanding the stuff to tell you, as someone living in a smaller world, what the bigger world was like. Yeah,
that was kind of like strange because obviously I was friends with Nick, and kind of like Pat was kind of like this looming large kind of figure in school. But it was kind of, I think Pat likes to paint himself as somebody that was inadequate, but we also always been very cool, very good at sport and very good looking, blah blah blah, and all that kind of malarkey. But they never let me join
the band because I was too fat and too ugly.
Shut up.
So I don't know what he's on about.
But anyway, I was always kind of scared to approach Pat. I didn't really see him that much because when myself and Nick were kicking around a lot, Pat had gone to America. And then he came back like some kind of lost pioneer. And he came back with just like, I think it was like 10 crates of books when he came back from America. So immediately his bedroom was just like, filled with all these books. And like he started barging in on some of our band meetings and kind of like, and actually just contributing just stuff that seems naive now, but stuff like Howl by Allen Ginsberg when you're 16, if you're introduced by that, by somebody who seems as if they know what they're talking about and they've kind of experienced that a tiny bit or walked those streets, then it's very impressive, and that was kind of like, it was almost just like some kind of director for us at that point.
Because your early music career wasn't exactly burgeoning. I mean, you developed many of your musical skills whilst busking on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, myself, Nick and Sean used to go busking in Cardiff. That was immediately as we'd left comprehensive school. So that first summer, where you're not quite sure where your life is going, was spent kind of busking in Cardiff, so to speak, just doing really bad indie songs. And that was kind of like really important for us. That was, because we felt as if we were becoming amazing, but we were terrible. But we actually felt as if we were becoming something. And then kind of like Pat came along as well. And it just felt as if we had our own little generational scene going on, kind of thing.
But you were this director figure. I mean, how good or bad were they, in your opinion, in those days?
Well, I thought they were brilliant. I was quite naive with my musical taste, I suppose. And they did used to inspire me. Like I used to sort of go up in my bedroom while they'd be practicing, because again, James, they wouldn't let me actually into the practices, again. So I'd be up in my bedroom, and I would just feel inspired by the passion behind it, and I would sort of get right in, and for those moments. So it does seem naive now and that innocent, but I do think when you're that young and you've got to have those dreams and those passions, and not just to end up in a chicken factory in the valleys type of thing. And by them doing it and doing something, it just sort of pushed me on again and that sort of thing. So they were good, I thought.
They were good. In 1999, you wrote a play called Everything Must Go, and then the Manics paid you the courtesy of stealing the title for their album.
Yeah, we did, yeah. It was actually, it actually came from a picture. You took a picture, was it?
Yeah.
Your son? Which one was it?
This is a picture of my little boy in front of
That's right, yeah. I was just like, Pat was doing, this picture is a symbol of what's happening in the valleys at the moment, like Gwendolyn, everything must go, shop closed down, but the youth in the front, my son. And like, we stole all that for kind of like for the album title. But kind of for us it was much more of a kind of like spiritual kind of wholesale. But we were at a point at that time where we need to kind of close a chapter in our history, because stuff was going on with Richey and stuff, and just Everything Must Go just seemed like the kind of purge. It seemed to stand for the kind of purge we needed to go through. But yeah, that was stolen from Pat. They never felt like a steal. It just felt as if we were back to square one, back in his living room, back to being 16 again. We'd stolen one idea from Pat and turned it into something else.
Well, one of the writers who's on in the festival this weekend, John Updike, said that the reason you should read is to know what to steal. So
yeah.
You were paying a courtesy, I suppose.
Yeah.
But with that play, it was a collaboration as well, because you used the Manics songs as the sort of soundtrack. You made the play feel a bit like a film about.
Yeah, some people say it's a Manics musical, which it wasn't quite a musical, really.
Rock Follies.
But it was just the songs, if it had been a Radiohead type of vibe, it would have been, well, I don't know them, of course, but, it did help. But you can use music, whatever, in a play, obviously. It did seem like a soundtrack, and there were times where, I know, be egotistical about watching the play, but I used to just fill up with tears. I sound really egotistical, and I'm sorry, because of the music, because the action on the stage, and it was like, it is like a film, that moment, and it's my first play, and poor Phil Clark, who I think is in the audience tonight, I must have sent him fucking hundreds of drafts of it, 50 pages long, and just terrible, long speeches, but he took the risk with it, and we were, as a collaboration, I think, not just me and the Manics, it was, the Sherman Theatre and Phil Clark and the actors, and I really felt I belonged for the first time in my life. I feel like Trisha coming out. I belong. Check, go to that door.
The thing that was noteworthy, if you sat in the audience, all of a sudden there were kids who might have never been to the theatre before who came along because of that. It actually felt as if you're going to see a Manics audience but transplanted in theatre, but the play itself had the same sort of energy you'd get in a rock concert.
Yeah, I think, and it was a hard balance. I didn't want to just replicate the Manic's lyrics. I wouldn't be no point as a writer doing that. And some people thought it was just because I was Nick's brother and I had to deal with a lot of that, really, putting the Manics on stage. But it really wasn't. It was this fit. And I think, it was great to see young people in the audience who went to see the play, and not just sat around a kitchen table talking about. It was a very proactive play in a way.
I mean, you had to grow up, you had to be in the shadow of your brother because you were Nicky Wyer's brother for a long time, and I suppose the more plays you write and the more poetry you produce, the more you actually stand apart, therefore.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard. Even though he's my little brother, sort of thing, I taught him everything, Even except his dress.
I hope dress sense, yes.
It's
Did you ever wear a frock when you were younger?
No, I couldn't get a size 24 or something. I couldn't. But it's quite hard. Even though, if I was in a band, fine to say, "Oh, you're trying to be like your brother," but I was just a struggling writer. I wouldn't, I was simple as that, really,
Because I'm always interested in the sort of psychology of why people create things. Now, when you were in school, James, I mean, you didn't have an easy time of it. I read about you being picked on a bit.
I've kind of got the classic. I've had the classic kind of national health kind of glasses that were like 4 times too big for my head kind of thing. Look like Woody Allen's Runt son. But it was just like that thing where you grow up, you're growing up and you become stereotyped quite early in your life just because of the way you look more often than not. I remember Pat bodied me a bit.
I didn't know.
And it's just you do get stereotyped very early when you're young, just because of the way you look. And it's you either come through that or you don't. You become another person when you leave school. And I think there were, by the time I got to the age 11, there were 2 things that kind of changed my life a wee bit, and that was probably being friends with Nick for a start, and it was rugby as well, because that got me fit and just like made me not scared of the other boys anymore. But that's just it didn't, kind of like up and then you lead up to 15, and suddenly if something new and exciting comes into your life, then you just realise you just run with it, and that was like music, and that was songwriting with Nick.
Early on, it seemed as if there was a sort of righteous anger boiling under the surface.
I think it's just being young, and it's a time and a place. It's just those 2 things. You got to remember, around about 1984, we were all 15 years old, I think. So kind of like there's a lot going on. There was the miners' strike, obviously, and that literally was outside our window. It was kind of marching past our window.
And you're still writing about that, because you're still writing songs about the aftermath of the strike and so on.
I think it's different now. I think sometimes touching upon it, but I think what we write about now is much more, personal manifestation of something else, whether it be something that's happened in the past. But it's not so. It's a bit more bleak now, I think. But like at that time, there was a lot going on, and it felt as if my father's a carpenter. I felt as if my father's job was in danger. A lot of my relations' jobs were in danger. All this marching past your window. And I was into Billy Bragg as well, even though he criticised us, that wanker. He was an inspiration for me when I was like 15. I loved him. And kind of like, so it's a time and a place, and then something like Billy Bragg being there, and all those events happening outside the window, and we loved music, and it was just all so obvious to us. So it was angry, but in an ironic sense, it was the glory period to be angry. It was a glorious era to be angry, and just define, just to be so sure at what you're angry at.
And you liked lots of those other angry bands, like the Clash and so on?
Angry bands. I don't know, the Clash, I never saw them as being, I just always thought they glamorised politics. Let's not get too dogmatic here. The Clash were just a glamorous rock and roll band with great lyrics and great music. But yeah, they were our kind of like inspiration at that time.
I think this might be a good point at which we could introduce the audience to your poetry, for those who don't know Patrick Jones's poetry.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm sure that we'll find ourselves talking about the situation in the world, because I remember you sending me a note last year,
last year,
asked me to contribute to an anti-war volume, because that's something that's been clearly a burning issue with you.
Yeah, I would say, I started writing a short book of poems just in my response to the build-up to the Iraq War, I think, and I just, I thought you would be a good person to sort of, give it a good plug on BBC, really. No, I didn't. I just a joke.
Yeah.
To do no, that's it.
Okay.
No, seriously, because I talked to John quite a bit and about his politics.
Do you know, I was going to say, I had some lines earlier about you being honestly passionate and passionately honest, but I won't use those now.
No, I just, to be honest, I'm just sick of asking Nick to do it and then, churning one out. And in the end, he made me write it for him. So I was, what's the point, So he's doing introduction. But I just thought, time to move away. And this is just a short poem, basically, called part one of a longer poem. I won't bore you with long poems. It's the rhyme with the ancient mariner syndrome. It's just called The White Feather. The white feather is the only time that the colour white is used to denote negativity, failure, dispossession, and insight to hatred. Dissent is feared in the lands of the free, questions revoked, alarms unheeded, freedom above responsibility. A blankness floods the mind as today war is no longer declared but continued. Ashes caught in the wind from far-off places we watch on the TV. It doesn't happen here as they live so differently. It's all that they know. Sparks shattering our silence as another war, a not so far off war, a not living room TV frenzy war, a here war, a now war, a white war, a clean war, a new war, an old war, your war, not my war. So today, I shall not salute, and I shall not march, and I shall not build practice bridges in the desert, and my children will never wear a uniform and bow to your orders as your general holidays in the Alps. No, because I will wear my white feather with pride, and I will throw away your prayer books, your Bible, your Quran, your manifestos. I will wear your negation with beautiful positivity, because cowardice is a gun, because cowardice is a missile fired from hundreds of miles, because cowardice is your judgment, because cowardice is flying a plane into an innocent building, because cowardice is killing your own people, and because cowardice arises from fear, and I am unafraid, because I shall wear my white feather with pride. Okay? Here.
The tenor of that poem has been expanded in the play that's been playing here last night and this afternoon, a play that started in the Blackwood Miners Institute, went to the ICA in London. It's a two-hander with music, specially written by James, and it's about two soldiers who meet in purgatory. Yeah. One is a soldier from the First World War who meets a soldier from the current Iraq War, and the deal is that you can only leave purgatory if you fess up to the whatever awful thing you have done.
Yeah, that's better than I could ever pitch it, actually, to any theatre. But it's very concise. And that was I wanted to write about war, and I didn't want to make it realistic, so to speak. I wanted to try and use poetry, and I was always influenced by Wilfred Owen's poetry in school. That's the only poem I can remember from school, was Anthem for Doomed Youth. And I just thought, I was reading this Wilfred Owen poem, during the Iraq War, and I just thought, today or whenever, and it just seemed those words were so relevant, and I just really wanted to put them in a play, and then just try and put two people together, and I just love battling with words, really. That's my trouble. I can't do much drama, but I just love battles with words.
You try and, influence, tell people about things in poetry and in plays. Mm-hmm. You introduce people to things in songs. I was telling you earlier how I bumped into someone in a midnight queue for your last but one album who'd started studying political science because of the Manic lyrics. But as artists, considering the parlous mess of the world at the moment, do you feel helpless, or do you feel that it's even more important to try and get your message through?
Very polite. At times I feel helpless, but then you write a play, you work with great actors and put people together, and I'll do it for nothing. There's no money sort of involved, and then someone, after seeing it, someone comes up to you and say, said, yesterday, that their son had been to Iraq, and she was really moved by the play. And you feel it's those tiny moments. I think that you're not going to change this massive world, but it's. Arthur Miller summed it up to me. He said he hoped his plays made people feel less alone, and that's such a simple thing, but I think that's what art can do deep down. Personally.
No, I was never so arrogant as to. I don't think we, as a band, were ever so arrogant to think that, number one, what we said was completely right, and number two, that it would change anything. It's just, I think we were just always trying to look to influence the same way that other artists influenced us when we were young. Like there's simple little, equations, Clash equals Sandinistas. They tell you what the Sandinistas were, I was 14, and then you begin to understand things about the Sandinistas. Matt Johnson from The Verve, was obsessed with Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre, so you go and read it. You may not understand it, but you go and read it, and you start discovering things. I think that's all you ever hope for. You don't think you're so didactic that you just teach everybody everything.
But there will be people in Wales who would not have heard of the singer and activist, the black singer and activist Paul Robeson, were it not for the Manics.
Yeah,
but there'll be some people who wouldn't know where Cuba was and why Cuba was so loathed by America, were it not for your going there.
Well, yeah, I think that's why we've always been perplexed at accusations of just Nick has had accusations of intellectual snobbery or just being, just way too pious for his own good because he thinks he's introducing people to things. We've written about these things from an angle of just sometimes fan worship. It's just like, wow, Paul Robeson was an amazing man. We want to write a song about him. Sometimes it hasn't been from the angle that we want to teach the world who he is. It's almost been like a fan letter sometimes, But I think that's where you never feel hopeless because it's proven that people do listen to things that you got to say sometimes. You just got to be very aware that that you can't overreach and expect too much.
People might level those accusations at some of your songs, but a song that no one could do that with is Ocean Spray, because in that you come to terms with what happened to your mother and her belief that drinking ocean spray could save her life. And I looked at a tape yesterday of you singing it by yourself on Top of the Pops, and it's not harrowing, but it's a difficult thing when you see someone actually standing there with a guitar and actually bearing a little bit of one's own.
Well, yeah. With that song, it was probably the first time I understood songwriting. I was having a conversation earlier today. I'm not a songwriter. I write music. I get all my inspiration from the lyrics to write music, so therefore I'm not a songwriter. I write music. But with Ocean Spray, obviously I wrote the lyrics, and then I wrote the music. And it was the first time I had become, a bona fide songwriter. And, actually singing it meant so many more, just kind of give me so many more different emotions than any other song I'd sit and sung in the band. And to be honest, I'm not in a rush to write a lyric again, because, I've got to be aware of the fact that the first time I wrote a lyric, it was over somebody dying. It was close to me. So I hope I don't write another lyric for a while.
There were some people who thought that you were coming up to the sort of greatest hits period of the band, but of course you've got a new album in the pipeline, and you referred to it earlier that Patrick's involved in some way. So the collaboration is active between you. Yeah,
I mean, you got to remember, the main axis between ourselves and Pat obviously lies between himself and his brother. Nick and Pat themselves. And I think it's really weird that Nick was writing some lyrics and he felt as if Pat could contribute, or Pat had written some poems and Nick felt as if he could contribute towards these poems. Suddenly he felt as if they were on the same page for once and that they could collaborate on some lyrics, which was, I kind of found a bit shocking at first, because I always saw, Pat as being a grand committee member, but he had a veto, but he didn't have any input in terms of writing lyrics, and then suddenly they're writing together, and it's it's good in a way. It's I think they think and feel the same things, but they approach them in very different ways, and it's kind of strange that, because Nick used to write lyrics with Richey, obviously, and it's the first time he's written with somebody else, another lyricist, and they had a yin-yang thing going on, Nick and Richey, and perhaps he might find that with Pat, now and again.
And presumably, it would have taken a long time for Nicky to get to the stage where he felt he could collaborate, having had
Definitely.
that intimate relationship with someone who then disappears.
No, because people always assume that, Richey was a driving force in writing lyrics and Nick was just a guiding hand. But that was just so far from the truth. They used to write 50-50 down the middle, up until the Holy Bible, which, Richey ran with the ball on that one, so to speak. But they were always 50-50 down the middle, and they always just bounced off each other. And of course, when Richey, obviously, what happened, once, the thing had happened with Richey, Nick had to realign his senses and everything he did as a lyricist. Suddenly that was it. There was nothing to bounce off. There were no contrary opinions. He had to write it all himself. So I think it took him a long time to get around the idea of actually opening himself up to somebody, another lyricist, which of course is Pat. I suppose the fact that it was Pat explains it really.
But they are very, very similar, because you often use these little staccato, almost like slogans, like Generation Terrorist is the sort of thing that you could have written. It's motorcycle emptiness, they're little things that sound like things it's like machine gun chapters sometimes.
I think it probably comes from the beats of time that we were into when we were young, I suppose.
On your albums, of course, you've introduced people to political ideas. You took, as I mentioned earlier, An Ira in Bevan. You sort of quoted An Ira in Bevan as the title of one of your albums. You've got a scene in one of your plays in Everything Must Go, where the kids go up to that memorial, high in the hills, the memorial to An Ira in Bevan, and it's despoilt, it's forgotten. It's the architect of the socialist care for people has gone.
Yes. Yeah, things happen similar times, I suppose. I remember going to it was a celebration of Ira Bevan's life, and we were up on the mountain, and me and Nick were together up there, and all the stones and his words, and I think we both went away then, and we had both been inspired. So it was just pure luck sometimes, But what I would say about these lyrics things, what I used to do was just nick lines from my poems, but then when I got an agent, the last time, then they asked if I could do some, so I think it's slightly different. No, a semi-truth, but they did, yeah. So now they're a bit more free, they've got more power now. I could tell me funny, it's terrible. Oh, in money, I feel like, yeah. Sorry, lower the tone.
But by dint of your music, you introduce people to not just to the political ideas, but for instance, one album cover was designed by Neil Howells, the artist from Nice, and then in another album, you actually reproduced this poem on the cover. I did ask you to read it, and you didn't want to, so you'll have to put up with me. It's a poem from the late R.S. Thomas's last collection, No Truce with the Furies, and this is a guy who's not willing to give up yet. It's got some extraordinary poems, but this is a poem called Reflections. The Furies are at home in the mirror. It is their address. Even the clearest water, if deep enough, can drown. Never think to surprise them. Your face approaching ever so friendly is the white flag they ignore. There is no truce with the Furies. A mirror's temperature is always at 0. It is ice in the veins. Its camera is an X-ray. It is a chalice held out to you in silent communion, where gaspingly you partake of a shifting identity, never your own. Why did you choose to put that on the cover?
Well, obviously Nick chose that poem, and I think it meant a lot to him at the time, because I think previous to that, Everything Must Go, the album had been taken off, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It was previous. Everything Must Go was before the use of Reflections.
Yes.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And I think it was a tiny bit of a reaction to, of course, in the music press, once you've had a bit of success, obviously, in your prior life to being very successful, if you've had some kind of anger or whatever in your music, press immediately see that success as disqualifying you as ever being able to say anything that's remotely angry ever again. I think Nick just wanted to discount that for a start. I think he just wanted to say, just because, we haven't got a song like If White America Tell the Truth for One Day, Its World Will Fall Apart, just because we even got a song like, Archives of Pain, which are distinctly political and do verge on being not dogmatic, but very straight down the line. Just because you haven't got lyrics like that anymore doesn't mean that you're still not trying to say something. Just because you've couched your language in something that is not as confrontational doesn't mean that you're selling out. Just because you're making different value judgments now and you're not so nihilistic doesn't mean that you're an empty shell. Success doesn't mean you're disqualified from trying to say any of these things. You're just trying to say them in different ways. And I think, that poem for him set that message up. And also, the lyrics on that album were very much more personal. And they were coming from I'd say it was a very, very it was judgmental in a very personal, guarded way, that album, lyrically, of the things outside of its world. And I think that poem summed it up. It was something that said, even, beyond, even when you're just inside your four walls, it never stops, and even if the message becomes more personal to you, it doesn't mean it hasn't got any relevance. I think that poem summed it up for him. And also R.S. Thomas, I think R.S. Thomas to Nick kind of posed a bit of a bridge between different Welsh identities as well, because let's not pretend there is a lot of sniping between the non-Welsh speaking and the Welsh speaking in Wales. There's a lot of sniping that goes on between them both. I think as if he felt that was a bridge between something that still represents one Welsh identity.
There has been sniping, but I think you both agree that maybe the things are getting a bit closer now, because as kids learn Welsh and you get bilingual education, therefore it's not a sort of badge of Welshness if people speak Welsh or whatever.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. And
the band itself has actually negotiated matters, its relationship to Wales.
How?
There was a period when suddenly the backdrop to the band would be the Welsh flag.
Right, gotcha. That would be a good one. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
And you'd actually start to comment about things in Wales. I remember you caused a little bit of furore when you said you'd never play at the opening of the Welsh Assembly.
Oh yeah, but that was just to do with the Queen. That's just completely different,
Because you're not a fan of the monarchy, you?
Well, no. I mean, no serious. Just no sane person would ever care about the issue itself. It's just black and white. That was no Welsh thing. It was just pathetic. But yeah, I think it's just very weird that kind of when you're young, you always want to leave where you grew up. You always want to leave it behind and go and discover something new. And as soon as you've left, you just become wistful for everything you've left behind, and you want to rediscover it. It's just the same old cliche, and it was true to us. As soon as we left, we just wanted to come back and reassert our Welshness, I suppose. I don't think in a crude way at all. It just happened.
And that wistfulness is sometimes for a place, and there's also a nostalgia for growing up. And you've got a poem which we could punctuate this with, about childhood.
It's not exactly glossy though.
No, but
that's all right. Yeah,
it is about growing up.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, John. I wasn't ready then.
There are very few daffodils growing in your poems, are there?
No, they cut and slashed and yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Daffodils are out. Call for Nick.
This is embarrassing. Can't find it. Yeah. Okay. Yes, okay, no need to explain it. It's called Commemoration and Amnesia. Am I an amnesiac or a haemophiliac, or is this a heart attack that burns these holes in these lips, that shelters and stings, that blankets then burns, that hurts and heals, to truth, to a sadness? The I will devote, of an increase in heart blood to varnish and veneer against their words that smeared and snarled. I commemorate, I instigate, I will not fake. The then, this, of why, of being, of seeing, of crying, of a silent soul, of tears and fears that fall to stand, and how I remember, and how I wish to forget. Pathetic, tosser, wanker, quimo, cripple, cunt, runt, bender, fucker, nothing, loser, girl, mammy's boy, so I will bottle your mind with verbs that find their place in nouns, of laced, narcotic, underground, my character, disdenied and undesigned, my soul declined, I bottle your mind, to commemorate the pain of this memory, of this dawning into a now. So know, and how I will desecrate, to educate and emancipate the chains that emaciated, the eyes that split my vision, the voices that stammered my tongue. Yet now I will speak, yet now I speak. This war of attrition, this heart-raged mission, this restricted code of a break-in recognition. So am I an amnesiac or a haemophiliac, or is this a heart attack? It's okay, I'm going to clap, so I get nervous.
And that poem actually appeared then on an album because you decided you were going to be a bit of a rock star yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I just love music, you know. I growing up, like I said, trying to edge my way into the band, playing 3 chords. It didn't work. And I was just really totally sick of poetry books, those little books that Seren Books churn out, which sell about 20 copies and all that, and they have big launches. I hated all that. And they wouldn't publish mine, so I thought, well, fuck it. I wanted to do it, but bitterness, you know. I wanted to do it my own way. Again, you know, I think the best things in art, you know, start with these tiny little ideas, and I approached Greg Haver, who now works with the boys and his little rec company, just to do a little acoustic album, and then it grew and grew, and yeah, it was just trying a different way of taking poetry and trying to melt things. It wasn't because I don't know, I saw an opportunity, a gap in the market or anything, you know. It was about just trying to take poetry a different direction, and James did some guitar on that one, yeah.
The collaboration that I went to see this afternoon, James, you wrote the music, but the images, the video images are of you know, American helicopter gunships and so on. You know, you can't pass the day without, you know, Iraq being, you know, present somewhere. What were you hoping to achieve by the play?
Okay. Well, you know, you start off with the idea of trying to bear witness and say something about what you see the state of the world. You know, the year passes, and then I'm watching the news again, and you know, I'll hear a soundbite, and I've got to repeat this. It was just something that the report that that a wedding had been, you know, bombed and attacked, and 40 people, women and children killed. The next day, an American general said, "Oh, it was a wedding, but bad people have celebrations as well." Now, a phrase like that, all that time on, just infers that a truth again. You know, to think, well, if art can try and say something, it is about asking those questions. And how can someone be so judgmental? And those are, you know, I work on those little lines sometimes, and they stick with me. And I've got to write about it, I've got to deal with it. So I wanted to achieve, but was holding the mirror up and just saying, well, it's 2 characters here. One is totally messed up, but they're both messed up by war. And the tiny things of war, the ideas that you're never allowed to finish your life. You know, you could never do the things that we could do, perhaps. And I don't know, just that. I wanted to put something human, you know, again, Ken Loach was talking about putting the human stories with the issues, and I just wanted to hold the mirror up and say, well, I feel this is wrong. I feel we should have learned from Wilfred Owen's poems that this shouldn't be happening the way it should. That's all I can say, really.
Because I was saying earlier about those little sort of portmanteaus where you put 2 words next to each other and they say play off against each other. One of the main pairs of words in this play is collateral damage.
It's one of the words, that's right, yeah, it was just like a list of words that we see on our screen: collateral damage, friendly fire,
precision strike,
bombing strike, that sort of thing, and liberation. And you look at that word these days as well. And I feel as a writer, you suck it in, you spit something out, and again, you fight your corner, or you don't fight your corner.
Yeah, I mean, there was a French poet who said there'd be no poetry after Auschwitz. Yeah. Well, that turned out not to be the case. We've almost reached the stage now with the Spanish Civil War, which the Manics have written about, where there have been almost as many books published as there were people who died in it. When it comes to something like Iraq, you're now writing in a sort of post-World Trade Center towers coming down and so on. Can you therefore write pop songs without there being a sort of shadow over them?
I think firstly it's nearly impossible to write a song that includes it all, really. I think I got to admit, you know, it's much easier to write about things that happen on a domestic stage. You know, I know, you know, obviously If You Tolerate This was about the Spanish Civil War, but it was much more in a retrospective nature, and it was, you know, used as trying to using a bit of the past to illustrate the future. I think that's easier. There's a lot more device in it. You know, if, say, we tried to write a song about something like the Iraq War now, it'd be like reportage in a song. It would just be really hard. You know, I think it's one of the hardest things to do, and I don't know if we could tackle it, really.
It's an interesting one where
we're not qualified.
But where you took Suicide is Painless or whatever and took
Yeah.
that on, it was curious how you found an extra poignancy in a song which is poignant in itself.
To be honest, it was, you know, we were asked to do that for charity, and it was the best track on that piece of crap album, so they released it as a single. So, you know, we just did it quickly for them because they asked us to do it, so.
Okay. I think this is the point at which we can give the floor over to yourselves. And I think there are roving microphones, are there? Yes? So, you have to give them time to jog down. There's a gentleman down here.
Thanks very much. You may both know that you made it in the top 50 of 100 Welsh heroes. I was first going to ask how you felt about that, and then ask who you feel should be number one, apart from an Iron Bevan.
I should also point out that R.S. Thomas was slightly ahead of James Dean Bradfield.
I mean, I was just, there was, well, number one, it's a bit corny, but I would go for Richard Burton. I just always find him, just captivating, just fascinating in every way, so self-destructive and so Welsh in every way, I think. And obviously in Iron Bevan would be at the top, but for hero worship alone, I would have gone for Richard Burton. I felt, if you're thinking about a chart, a poll in those terms, then to be included in it is just ridiculous, really.
And I would have gone for Idris Davis, the poet from Rumney, but he wasn't even in the top 100. He meant a lot to me as a poet growing up, and his sort of use of words, and again, trying to say something about the state of Britain. I thought it was a really good idea, although I just think when you look at the amount of votes, really, like, I came number 32, I think, right? And,
you phoned me up to say you were number 32.
But I only had like 250 votes. Well, I think that, there needs to be a broader thing, with more postal votes, and just make it, a bit more.
I don't think postal votes were.
Not for me, I just. But most of them were my mum, But what I got out of it was great, looking at all these different people who I never heard of really, and just I don't know, learning about. So I think it's a good idea. But Idris Davis would have been my one. Okay.
Anyone else? Down here. Front. Somewhere.
You were saying last year about doing Die in the Summertime, Move and other songs, How's It Break From Your Past. How is this relating to possibly re-releasing Holy Bible in a few months' time? What's going on?
I think basically it was good to play Die in the Summertime because we'd never ever played it live ever before. So, it felt in a strange way, kind of new. Holy Bible thing, I think you got to appreciate that album stands alone in our canon, if we've got a canon. And I think it stands alone, and obviously it's indelibly tied up with a memory of Richey as well. So, if there is a special edition Holy Bible, obviously we feel as if we're paying a lot of respect and dues to Richey himself. So yeah, I mean that is so far away from divorcing ourselves from our past, but sometimes you've got to honour those commitments, and that's one we've got to honour, definitely.
I got a question for James, and then I've just been a massive Manics fan, to the point of being obsessive, and an early Manics fan as well. And
make me feel comfortable. I'm also a keen Christian, born again Christian, right.
And I was just wondering, with songs like Crucifix Kiss in the beginning, and now songs like There by the Grace of God, I've wondered if coming back with your Welshness as well, if you've become less cynical towards Christianity.
I would definitely say, I was talking earlier about Nick and Richey. Sometimes arriving at the same conclusions, but from very different approaches. And I think that's one case and example. You know, I remember Nick and Richey writing Crucifix Kiss together, the lyrics. You know, Nick leans towards spirituality a tiny bit more than perhaps you would guess. His own version of it. Yeah. And they, by the grace of God, I think, you know, that definitely there's something in there which I didn't quite understand. But you would say that's one example of, you know, they, by the grace of God, it turned out that way because Richey wasn't collaborating on that song. Because, you know, Nick wasn't as cynical about beliefs themselves, whether it be a religious belief or, you know, whether it be an ideal, political ideal or whatever. I don't know if it's coming back some kind of Welshness, because I don't know if any of us have got roots in the Welsh Presbyterian Church or anything, you know. But I definitely know that Nick is not cynical about holding a religious belief whatsoever, you know. I'm not saying he leans towards it, but I definitely feel as if he feels engaged by it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Down front again.
Hi, question for Patrick. I know you've, on one of your spoken word CDs, you've put acoustic music to the poetry. Is there any reason why you didn't join a band and become a lyricist rather than a poet?
Right, I sort of touched upon that earlier, you know, being a bit fat and a bit ugly when I was younger. Not now. And, no, to be honest, I feel totally free with poetry, and poetry in the theatres where I feel I can speak my truth, I suppose, really. As I feel a bit constrained with words and that. And again, I haven't got many friends to be in the band with, and that's the true story. So
wait a minute, Nick always moans about the fact that you and your girlfriends are always ruining his holidays. You're like one of those kids with like tassels and a big spiky haircut, and everybody thought was cool. Revisionist.
So, on an artistic level, you know, and a social problem level, that's what I think. Like I said, I feel totally free with the way, you know, I express myself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Gentleman in the check shirt.
First of all, I'd like to thank the three of you for such a rich session that we're in the middle of this evening. It's really tremendous. A couple of political questions. Firstly, to James, I believe in one of your earlier album covers, you had a picture of the European flag in flames. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was New Art Bride.
That's the one. I wonder whether that still reflects your attitude to the EU today. And a very cheeky question. Next week in the Euros, if Nye could come back, what do you think he'd do?
I think they're quite simple answers, really. The EU, the burning European flag, that was on the cover of the record when we were young, because I think we were kind of like being talked to by certain politicians that was our future Europe. And we were so messed up and nihilistic that even that was burning and in ruins. But kind of like, if you can extend how you feel about Europe to how you feel as a British person, I think it's easy to kind of understand where you stand. You know, it's all great being in Wales and feeling Welsh. You know, I'm sorry if this brings it down to like a simple equation, but when it comes to sport, the most important thing in my life is the British Lions. You know, as a band, you know, I don't see any. You know, if you're snobbish about being obsessed with sport, I'm sorry. But kind of the British Lions means so much to myself and Nick and Sean. You know, absolutely, just ferociously love it. And I've got to say, you know, I feel just as much British as I do Welsh. And therefore, as I feel just as much British as being Welsh, I think one day I'm going to feel very much European too. You know, I think if you're very comfortable in your own identity, and you're very sure of what it stands for, then you just extend that border, I think. Nye. I'm going against probably what Nick would feel, but you know, if Nye was here, obviously the national thing is a, you know, that's a foregone conclusion. You know, you would just pile the money into it. Probably been mismanaged, but he piled the money into it. But I'd like to abolish church schools. I think, Tony Blair's obsession with, more and more church schools, which he is obsessed with, I think is the wrong way. They're paid to teach, not preach. If you have a belief, it's inside you. You don't teach it to people. That came to my head anyway.
Down the front. And then I think we'll have time for one more question. Then go on 1 minute standby. Who want to conclude, perhaps?
Okay.
I've got a question for James. You said, I think you said in an interview in the Western Mail the other day that when you were growing up in the 80s that the sort of the political targets were a bit more well defined than they are today, and that now it's a bit more hazy. What I wanted to ask you was how do you think that the changes in the political climate that people live in now, how do you think that's affected the way that bands make records and the way that art and poetry and music is produced in the country?
I think, like I said, it's when you're young, you do speak a different language as well, and as you get older, you do lose the right to speak that language. You can try and talk about the same things, but you've got to have grown up and be less nihilistic about things. Destroy everything, new beginning. It's not going to work when you're 30 years old. But kind of like, I would hate to be in a band that was 18 years old now. I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't actually deal with having to redefine my anger and have to almost go against your own kind. If you grow up in like the valleys, your natural kind of affiliation to Labour was so strong it was unquestioned. Now, if you're 18 and growing up in valleys, you'd be like, well, I'm going to go for them too. Sometimes, in some respects. And I think, it's affected our songwriting. I think, again, we're just much more personal. No, I couldn't deny it and say we're less political. I think we are. I think that's how it's affected our writing. But when you find it in our lyrics, you realise it's kind of like it is locked up with a lot more personal experience, rather than trying to say something that is universal. That universal truth you're trying to achieve, which when you always fail at it, it's harder to go for that universal truth factor. I think that's a big difference.
Right, and one last question from someone on that side.
Hi. Just one quick question. I'm going to Iraq as soon as possible to meet my relatives, my cousins, and I was wondering if the Manics will be touring over there anytime soon.
Probably not, no. I don't want to, but no. I mean, no.
Right, not in the next 5 years anyway. I think we might as well, because we get such rumbustious performances from young Patrick.
And no one asked me any questions. No, I'm only joking. I'm just playing the sad guy.
Patrick, right. Would you like to read us a poem?
Thank you, George. No, I'm only joking. I prefer poetry.
Will your play be on over there, maybe?
This poem to me sums up a certain mindset that I have at the moment, and it's totally against, perhaps, I don't know, the way the world is going, and I just feel we should really question any form of nationalism, and it's just called Disunited Nation. It starts off with a quote, so you can fall asleep now, from Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a beautiful little booklet. I recommend it. Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. Yeah, in Great Britain, land of hope and glory, land of their fairy tale stories. We patrol our borders, we obey their orders. But we spent 563 million on the dome and closed our hospitals and moan at asylum seekers taking our homes, our jobs, our money. So let's lock them up before they destroy our economy. See, we're lovely people here in Wales, we're no racists. But if they come here, they get our fists. Yes, in Great Britain, this disunited nation of red, white and blue, of white male bigotry and children, learning through Sun headlines and Telegraph lies. Howard proclaims and Blair denies, as 58 refugees die in front of our eyes. We patrol our borders, we obey their orders.
But we welcome Hitachi, Iowa, Toshiba, fucking LG. We worship Genola, Zola and Viali. But we spit at frightened refugees. So I propose that next time a politician or anybody mentions the words detention and refugee so casually, I will ask them to look in my Bible, the dictionary, where they will see that the word refuge is before refugee and that detente comes before detention. So ignore their orders and destroy all borders. Okay, sorry, thank you.
Thanks very much indeed to both Patrick and James Dean Bradfield. James described himself earlier when he was a boy as being like Woody Allen's runt offspring. Well, in one of the Woody Allen films, I think it's Annie Hall talks to someone and he says, "You've been a sincere sensation." And I think you'll agree that these two this evening have been a sincere sensation. So thank you very much indeed. Too many lists, you know, I could have done the core stuff. Also, like, crystallize it.